Hey Synthheads, today we're going to be talking about studio configurations. Should your studio be set up for live play, for studio recording only, or both? Hi, I'm Pure Ambient Drone, and this is my channel where I talk about synthesizers. I demo them, I review them, and I make electronica music. If you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button and tap that bell, and let's get into the video. Hey, welcome back. I'm Pure Ambient Drone here in the studio with you today to talk about studio configurations. A lot of times I read online and I talk to people with studios and they ask me, should I have a studio that is set up in one room or one part of the room even for all studio work? Just studio recording, no live play whatsoever. Or should I set my studio up for all live playing? Now when I'm saying live playing, let's be clear what I'm saying. I'm not talking about something that you can tear down, put in the back of a car or a truck and leave with. I'm talking about the configuration of how it's hooked up into the mixer board and how it's being recorded. And that's what I mean by live play. My equipment in here is all set up for live play and studio recording. When I say live play, once again, I'm talking about I could turn on every one of these machines and get sound out of them through my mixer board and record each and every one of my synthesizers on their own separate tracks. And that's the way I like to set up my studio. The other question is do I have two separate work areas? I tried that at one time, and I got to be honest with you, I hated it. Because what I found myself doing is bouncing between two different rooms and two different computers trying to get the sound that I wanted in my recordings. So what I was doing was I was coming in here and scratch patting my ideas out. And what I mean by that is I would do a live play on my synthesizers and record a basic track, a rhythm, a lead, some drums, some bass. So after I was done recording that track, I would take it into another room where I had modules. Now the reason why I kept the modules in this room is because I didn't really feel that they were suited for live play. They didn't really have the knob and slider tweaking ability that the equipment in this room has. So I would go in there and polish up the track. But I always needed something in the next room. So I'd be bouncing back and forth. And it became so tedious that I was losing the creative flow. So that's when I decided to make a hard decision of just putting everything into one room to where after I was done recording the basic track, I could go into studio mode and lay tracks on top of what I did in a live setting. This works best for me, I have found. I just don't do a great job when I have to bounce between two different studios, two different rooms, two different PCs. For me, it was very tedious. I ended up hating it, and it was daunting. And I would wake up in the morning just thinking about the idea, and before I knew it, I completely stopped recording entirely. It got that bad. Now, that's my opinion on it. That's what's working for me now, is to have everything in one room. And there's limitations to that because you have to have a room that's big enough to accommodate all of your gear. Now, if you don't have the amount of gear that I have got, then you're probably going to be able to fit it all into one room. But when you get to the size of the synthesizer collection that I have, you may have to look into some other ideas, such as, do you have to build a room onto your house if you're recording from your home? Which is what I am doing. I'm recording from my home. And I took a whole section from my home and put all of my gear in it, and I am reinventing ways of squeezing things in. So if you do have a large collection of synthesizers and you want to be able to use all of them, you're going to need something that's going to hook them up into your recording device. So what I would say to you is what I invested in is I invested in a PreSonus Studio Live 32. It's right over here. It's got 32 channels, and no, it's not enough for everything that I have here because there's a lot of stereo outs, but not everything needs a separate track entirely to itself because I record leads all on one track and I'm only playing one lead at a time 90% of the time. So over here I have the MX1 Roland, and I have all of my lead synthesizers plugged in to the Roland MX1, and then that goes into the Studio Live 32, and that's for all leads, because 90% of the time I'm only playing one synth at a time. And why is that important? Is because when I go back into the DAW to EQ, compress, set levels, I have every instrument on its own track. And so the reason why that's so important to me is because I don't want my bass fighting with my drums. I don't want my drums fighting with my lead. I don't want my lead fighting with my rhythm. And I don't want to take all the time to EQ all that out and then record it and then hope that I got it all right. You have to have post-production if you want to keep what you recorded, right? And so this gives me the ability to do all of that. If all you're doing is studio work, then you only need enough inputs into a basic mixer with 2 outs into your DAW. And what I mean by that is that when I first started doing this, I didn't have a Studio Live 32. I had an analog mixer, and I had this Roland MX1. And I put all of my gear into my analog mixer. I think it had 16 inputs. And then I took the mains out and put them into one of the into 2 of the inputs, left and right, into the Roland MX1. The Roland MX1 in turn went into my computer system to record into my DAW. But everything was squished together on 2 tracks, okay? And I found it very hard to EQ and to mix anything live. For the studio, however, it was great because I only needed 2 channels at the most at a time. So I could record each track individually. So if I was doing studio work and I wanted to record any one of these synthesizers that I had here, that worked perfectly. But for a live setting, everything was getting squished together and the tracks were coming out muddy, if you will. They weren't the best, put it that way. There was some fine EQing that I could do on the mixer boards pre-recording, and that helped out a lot. And I think I did a pretty good job on some of those recordings, given the routing that I had at the time. However, I didn't like that. I didn't want to chance it anymore. I wanted to make better music. I wanted to make more thought out tracks. And the only way you can think your tracks out is to have time to do that with. And separating your synthesizers into separate recording tracks is the only way you're going to buy yourself time and the ability to really EQ, compress, and level set accurately. And that's how the studios do it. They track everything individually so that they can put them all together and the instruments don't end up clashing with one another. You want to leave space on your tracks and carve out space using EQ and compression and level setting so that one instrument doesn't run over the other. And that's the important factor when you're recording. I like to be able to sketch out a jam and then build on that idea in a studio format, in a studio environment, without bouncing from one room to the next room and then back to the other room. To me, that was very tedious. I did not like that. So when you're planning this out, you need to make sure you have enough room for whatever you're going to do so that your studio can grow with you and you can grow with it. So what I have now works for me a lot better than it did before, and I'm very happy with it, and I don't see myself changing anytime soon. The only thing I keep running out of is inputs. Like I said, I have 32 inputs on the Studio Live, and I told myself when I got that, if I need more than 32, I need less synthesizers. But you guys know, if you're listening and watching these videos of mine, that gas is a real thing, and it gets the best of us, right? And there's always something new coming out that catches my attention, and I just want everything working on its own track. I don't want to have to dig it out of a closet or take it from a corner where it's been sitting and hook it up. That's not my workflow. That's not what I like to do. I like to have everything at my disposal where I can just grab it, play it, record it. And that's my workflow. That's how I like it. What's your workflow? How do you like to have your setup? What do you think about all of this? Share your comments below. We love hearing from you. When I say we, I mean all the synth heads on here, right? We learn from each other. That's what we're here for. just a quick note, we're not here to cut down on anybody. We're not here to attack anyone. We're not here to judge anybody. We're here to share with everybody. And everybody's experiences are different. And that's why I do these videos, because my experience with synthesizers is somewhat different than anybody else's, just like yours is. I think we can all learn from each other. And if we learn to get along and be polite and be nice and be professional, even if we're not pros, if we act that way, we can get a lot more done. Hey, I'm Pure Ambient Drone, reminding you that you can go on my webpage, pureambientdrone.com, and you can find all of my finished music tracks. And if you haven't done so already, please tap that subscribe button, because it encourages me to continue with these videos. Until next time, cheers.